Hello and welcome to We Are the Weirdos, Aunty-ji, a podcast by Weirdo Zine and Collective. My name is Neil and I'm the editor of this podcast, and occasionally I'm the host. Weirdo exists to document and celebrate the experiences, perspectives and contributions of South Asian people in alternative subcultures around the world. We do this for our print zine, articles on our website, events and sharing stories via this podcast. In each episode of We Are the Weirdos, Aunty-ji, we interview a South Asian creative to find out about their journey in the alternative scene and their career to date. Today's guest is Sam Chetan-Welsh. Sam is the guitarist and one of the founding members of the band Ithaca. Ithaca are a dynamic metal band hailing from London and have been part of the hardcore music scene since their inception in 2012. Their sophomore album, They Fear Us, released in summer of 2022, garnered resounding critical acclaim. Notably, Kerrang scored the album 5Ks and placed it in second position in their 50 best albums of 2022 list. In this episode, Sam delves into the history of Ithaca, from their recent first ever US tour in the summer of 2023 and also the beginnings of the band. Hailing from mixed heritage, Sam shares his poignant insights on the evolving landscape of diversity and inclusion within today's metal and alternative music scene. He reflects on how this landscape has transformed and progressed since his formative years as a teenager, discovering metal for the first time. Well, Sam, welcome to the podcast. Thanks so much for coming on. Really do appreciate that.
Thanks for having me. It's a pleasure.
So, I've got an interesting story about your band. It's probably not that interesting, but I discovered you guys in a very kind of, I suppose in a different way, really. So I heard of you guys, and I remember reading a glowing review in Kerrang for They Fear Us. You know, they gave you 5Ks, didn't they? And I was like, oh, right, okay, they sound interested. And then I attended 2000 Trees Festival this year. It was like Thursday, and I said to my pals, like, oh, can we, like, wouldn't mind checking out this band if they kind of sound interested. And I was quite taken back. I really was. I was really impressed with your set. And obviously there were a couple of things besides how sort of visceral and powerful the music was. You guys opened with a Hindu mantra, and coming from a Hindu background, I was wondering, first of all, like, what hats off to you for that performance, because I was just really taken back. Well, so we're on the front row, right? We're on the front row of the right, so I'm quite near the speaker as well. And all of a sudden, I'm hearing this mantra being blasted out in an environment where I would never expect to hear something like that. And then I have to explain to my friend what that was. So yeah, I was just wondering, Sam, if you could just like talk to me about that, because I'm just curious and fascinated by it, really.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose, like, stepping back, the origin of it is, I would say, with this record, I in particular, I mean, all of us in general, like, the kind of meta story of this record is all of us giving, can I swear on this, by the way? Sorry.
Yeah, go for it. Yeah.
All of us giving a lot less of a shit this time about, like, well, in general, just giving less of a shit and feeling like we could authentically, I think we all just feel more like ourselves this time. And like we're communicating, we're just standing in a lot more authentically. And one of the biggest ways that that's represented itself for me is wearing my identity a lot more proudly, and just being more forthrightly communicating, like, you know, a big part of me and where I come from is my Indian ancestry, even though I'm mixed race and basically like white passing. Let's be honest. I don't really know my British family. I spent way more time with my Indian family, and so my Indian heritage is actually extremely important to me. Like, you know, my bar was the first person who taught me how to kind of cook, and like I grew up eating Gujarati food, and like I can't speak the language, so that's a big problem and a big Desi.
Can you understand it?
Yeah, a bit. I actually took Hindi classes for a couple of years to just, because I was like, I'm going to learn Gujarati, and all my uncles were like, don't bother, it's useless, learn Hindi. And I was like, okay, fine. Which I think is a very Gujarati response, because it's very business minded. So it's like a purely capitalist approach to this thing that for me was about like identity and exploration. Sure. They were like, no, don't bother, it's a waste of time. You know, forget it. Yeah, I'm wearing my identity more proudly this time. And one way in which that exemplifies itself is like, you know, I wear a chandler on stage, and we have this Ganga Aarti mantra playing at the beginning of the set. And both of those things in their own ways are a reference to to me, like, I feel like I come from a very strong lineage of Indian women who've like raised me, from my mum to my grandma to her mum, and the stories that were passed down about all these women, and all that. And there's so many strong Indian women in my family who I feel like have kind of, yeah, been so formative in making me who I am. And the particular auntie that the mantra is from was, I recorded it. So after my mum passed away, I went to India for a couple of months to do a bit of like, I guess, sort of, you know, in a very kind of typical way to kind of, I don't know, find myself. Obviously it wasn't my first time in India, but spent some really good time out there. And I just recorded this at the opening on my phone, because I'm like, this is really, really powerful and very, very moving. And also because it was about beckoning the Ma Ganga, you know, like the mother goddess. I was like, there's something about kind of divine femininity or something. Anyway, I was like, this is really cool. I'm just going to record it because it's a really moving sound. I recorded quite a lot of temple sounds while I was out there, just from my own memories, if anything else. I didn't know I was going to use them for anything. Then when we were doing the record, we had the title track, Weirdos, and all these themes were emerging both in that song and across the album when I started to read the lyrics from our vocalist about like divine feminine power, like supplanting patriarchy. And I was like, there's something in this here. And there's like a drum break bit that I've already put in that I kind of pitch shifted to sound a bit more like a doll anyway. So I was trying to get a kind of, you know, Indian reference vibe in that track anyway. And so we plonked it in, and you can hear it a bit more mushy, but you can hear it in that track. And then I went to our producer and was like, could we turn this into a kind of cool intro thing? And he did, and like we made it, as it goes on, it gets way more ominous and sinister, and it becomes way more like overwhelming and suffocating. And when that intro is playing, that's when I'm sort of like, for me, I don't know if this sounds a bit like wanky or whatever, but for me, that's when I'm kind of almost like summoning the ancestors. I'm really like intensely like, it's all kind of coming to me, and the kind of person that I am on stage is like coming out, and I don't know, I'm kind of trying to channel that power. That's why I wear the chandler as well, because it's like something my mum wore, something at specific times, something that my bar wore every day. That divine feminine power is extremely important to me, and it's something I'm trying to kind of communicate through our music, you know.
How did the rest of your band react when you were like, and your producer react? I mean, I don't doubt it wasn't anything but positive, but I'm sort of thinking from my experiences, not that I don't think any of the people I've played in bands would have an issue with it, but I suppose from my world, it's so separate, isn't it? And I just I love the way you brought it together. It was a bit of a moment for me, if I'm honest with you, Sam. It was quite, it was quite something. It really threw me off. Yeah. So like, anyway, how did your band react to that initially? So,
well, I should say just on that point specifically, I mean, it's also supposed to be directly confrontational in that exact way. It's like really trying to immediately get the audience into a sense of like, no, we're like we're trying to do something different here. Like, we're immediately trying to take you somewhere else, and we stand proudly in who we are. And like, you know, so I'm just incredibly gratified to hear that it had that reaction, and like any Desies who come to the show always come up to me afterwards. They're like, what was that all about? Oh my god. And like, it's really, which is the coolest thing. Like when we played Birmingham, I had like 3 separate people being like, what was that? You know what I mean? Because
that's amazing.
Your question, how did the bandmates react? No, they were super. I mean, I think like the moment when I kind of pulled my phone out and I was like, guys, I've got this cool recording, I think was like actually a pretty magical moment in the studio, because like our vocalist was like, oh my god, like, I can't believe you've been sitting on this the whole time. Like, and it just works so perfectly, and it just started, and then the kind of themes of the album really started to cohere in that moment, because we hadn't, like, our vocalist was getting us there, but we hadn't quite realized that, like, this was a kind of overarching narrative. So yeah, they were super hyped about it. They're super supportive of all this stuff, like anything to do with kind of me representing the culture that I come from, my identity, and all this stuff. Like, I don't know, they're incredibly supportive. Also, look, I mean, even if you have no idea what it is, it's kind of a cool sound. It's like interesting and different, and like there's another sort of please stop me if I'm blabbing, but there's another kind of interesting aspect to it, which is in 90s hardcore fans. One of the inspirations for me using it as an intro is actually, I don't know if have you heard of the band Shelter? Do you know them? They're like a Krishnacore band, and
No, I don't
they
actually.
have mantras at the beginning of their sets normally. And I saw an old performance of theirs, and I was like, oh, that's interesting. But this is like a bunch of white dudes doing it, so I wonder what would happen if I actually used not only something that feels more like resonant with the culture that I actually come from, but something that I've recorded myself to kind of directly disrupt that thing. We actually got asked when we were in the States, like, are you a Krishnacore band? And I was like, no, but thank you for asking, because it allows me to tell the story of like where this comes from. Even though, as you say, I'm not a Hindu. I don't identify as a Hindu, and I've not spent loads of time like going to temple when I was growing up. It was still a very, very important part of like the environment in which I was incubated, and like watching my bar pray and all this sort of stuff. It's been
Yeah,
around. So anyway, so the guys were really, really supportive, and
yeah.
yeah, I think they just think it's cool,
I've not heard the term Krishna core before. Is that like alternative music for people who are practicing Hindus? Is that the right term?
Yeah, it's I'm not an expert in it, but it was a really big scene in the 90s, coming out of kind of sort of straight edge, as hardcore went from being more punky to being more like metallic and metal influenced. There were bands like Earth Crisis and stuff who kind of took the ideals and values of straight edge and vegan and all this, and other bands, again, sorry, this is not my field of expertise, but who took that level of seriousness to hardcore, and then that became like linked to kind of Krishna consciousness. And Shelter is one of the main Krishna core bands, but there are a few others who really really explored the ideals of like the that Hare Krishna movement and that kind of thing.
That's
It's
really
really
interesting.
interesting. I'd recommend checking it out, and they're good bands if you're into like, if you're at all into metallic hardcore. Like they're good bands,
Yeah, I do like hardcore, to be honest. More when it comes to 90s stuff, more sort of like post-hardcore, massive Fugazi fan. So
Oh, sick.
so
Yeah, great.
yeah, just love them. But yeah, absolutely, like Quicksand, things like that. So probably more on the post side, but yeah, definitely check them out. So speaking of all
Definitely.
things live, Sam, you've just come back from your US tour.
Yeah. Last Monday, but yeah.
How was it?
Yeah, it was nuts. It was actually really brilliant, and I don't know. I really didn't know how it was going to go, because it was a huge amount of preparation and money and time and hard work to do. But it was awesome. Like, particularly certain shows in particular, like the New York show, the San Francisco show, Aftershock Festival, like they were amazing. Like, being in America and being like, there's people here who really like your band, even though we're just playing club shows, but like, it was just such an eye opener. And also, I don't know, the Americans are really receptive to earnestness, and so like they will well up for a bit of us. I think, I don't know, like, because I give a speech normally when we play live, both reflecting on like the possibility of healing from trauma. Oh well, you've heard it because you've seen this, but healing from trauma, and the importance of diversity and inclusion in hardcore and metal. And like, I don't know, like I think some of that stuff, or at least people in the conversations I had, that stuff really resonated with people. And I don't know, I talked to a lot of people of color and like people from other backgrounds, and I don't know, it was incredibly special. And even more than that, I mean, just the travel, driving from one side of the state to the other was an incredible eye opener. Just mad experience, absolutely mad.
Yeah. A couple of years ago, well, I say a couple of years ago, it's probably like near enough 7 or 8 years ago now, I traveled the southwest of America, and
Wow.
yeah, just the vastness of that. Basically, that trip left me with, that classic feeling of insignificance that every human being has. One, that sort of like, does anything we do matter? That really
Totally.
resonated, but totally in a good way, Sam. Not even in a bad way. It was just sort of like, Okay, well now I can see that it focused me in a really interesting way. I just remember standing in like these national parks and going, "Oh my god, this is the most beautiful thing I've ever seen in my life," but also recognize my insignificance, and
The
it
vastness is
changes you.
crazy. It does. The vastness is unbelievable. When we were driving through from like Texas, similar, across the Southwest through New Mexico, as you say, the vastness of the plains, the the sheer power of the kind of weather systems. Like we were caught in this enormous storm and like lightning going off and like extraordinary.
Yeah.
And you definitely have a kind of ego death kind of existential moment for sure. Yeah.
Ego death, yeah, that's the best way to put that, I think. Let's take it back a little bit. I'm always interested when people say of Asian heritage, get into alternative music, whether that's metal, punk, hip hop, whatever it might be. So could you tell me a little bit about that? How did you get into it all? Who were your early influences?
Yeah, good question. So I think I've got to initially absolutely credit my dad because he had a thin but very very wide music taste, which is kind of similar to how I approach music. Like he listened to just a vast array of stuff, ranging from usual dad rock stuff like Led Zeppelin and Pink Floyd to like classical music, Django Reinhardt, early Delta blues, Lauryn Hill. He just had an extraordinarily wide palette of music. But obviously, rock music was a massive part of his taste. And the first time I remember being like, I want to do that is listening to Paperback Writer by the Beatles, actually, which has just got like it's got a bit of a riff. And I was like, that was enormously mind expanding for me. And that was when I was like, yeah, okay, I think I want to do this kind of guitar thing. I'm immediately drawn to it. And then it was just the usual stuff. It was, like it was the new metal era, and like it was very popular. Kind of, it was a very important part of the culture at the time, and the kind of skate culture and all this sort of stuff. A really pivotal moment actually was when I was a teenager. I was very very religious actually, but not Hindu at all. I was like an evangelical Christian, and which is a whole other story. But in my church, there were like brown guys who really loved metal, and like 3 of them, and I'd never really met anyone else like that before, and also one of my cousins is as well. And so I think like through hanging out with some of those older kids at my church, that really got me into a lot of the stuff that really is early influences on this band. Under Oath, Killswitch Engage, Misery Signals, all those kind of, but like that kind of 2000s post-hardcore metalcore stuff was that is where I kind of really took that turn. But at the same time, throughout that whole period, I think that the biggest thing my dad taught me was to keep an open mind for music in general. So even when I was listening to Misery Signals and Under Oath and whatever, I was still listening to like James Brown. I've always been a massive James Brown fan, all sorts of other stuff, But anyway, like keeping a breadth of taste as well. Does that answer your question at all? I don't know if it does.
Yeah, it does. It does. It does. I was waiting for the metal to come in. Actually, I was like, because obviously you can't deny the fact that you are a metal band. Throughout. Well, I was going to get a point. I think.
Maybe, exactly. Apart from one notable exception, yeah. Exactly.
Yeah. Well, maybe we can talk about that actually, because I really like that song.
Good.
But, Sam, if you don't mind me saying this, and I don't think there's anything wrong with saying this, but it's a pop song, man.
Yeah, it's a power ballad. Yeah.
You're happy with that, yeah? You're comfortable with me saying that?
Yeah, and unquestionably, yeah. No, I take that as a compliment, if anything, to be honest, yeah.
It's an incredibly bold move because it's not even, okay, it's rocky. Where did that come from? Like, and that's a bold sort of decision to put that on such a, you got some bone-breaking riffs on that album,
Yeah, a lot of screaming, a lot of yelling,
yeah. So that's a bold move.
Yeah, I mean, again, thank you, by the way, I really appreciate it. I think like Hold Me Held came from, again, that sense during lockdown. As I say, we just stopped giving a shit. Like I think I've said this in a few other interviews, but for me, like the veil between this life and the next felt extremely thin. Like seriously, like I really felt like, and I think I like, because of my mum passing and stuff, I have a natural propensity towards kind of feeling like, life is short. There is not loads of time that we have here. And that was the kind of very prevalent atmosphere for me during COVID. And so what I was just like, I'm just going to write what I want. I'm just going to write what I want. And really, I don't care. And also, I think people will get it because genres are collapsing, all the boundaries are collapsing. Zoomers don't care about genres really, or it doesn't seem to me like they do. It's like the tide is turning away from like, you're a metal band, so you write this. It's like, no one cares about that anymore. That's so dead. And I was like, as long as you're standing in something authentically, you can do what you like. And we as a band are very, very, we love pop music, and we mostly listen to pop music in the van. I love like 90s power ballads, particularly R&B power ballads. So like New Edition, Boys to Men, Bobby Brown, like Tevin Campbell, people like that. Like so much of that stuff is an absolute bit of me. And also when I was thinking of that song, I was like, the arc of the album is also about the possibility of healing from trauma. It's not just about like staring into the abyss and I feel really shit. And it's like, because that's fine, that's very, very absolutely valid. I feel like there's 100 metal bands who offer you that, like that experience. Whereas we particularly were trying to say like, through deep inner work and through healing, you can rebuild. Like things can be better. So yeah, we were just trying to offer that sense of like hope, a sound that is genuinely nostalgic, so that it does kind of give you that sense of warmth and kind of, almost like self-parenting, which is a practice that I've learned through therapy. And it's music also that reminds me of my mum. It's the kind of music we listen to together. So like Michael Bolton and Celine Dion and all that sort of stuff, that was very Whitney Houston. That was the stuff we would listen to together. So yeah, I was just like, fuck it. I'm just going to see how this goes. And it was funny because it started as like a kind of boring post-rock interlude. And I was like, oh, these are so dead, these post-rock interludes. Like we need to stop. So what could I do? And I just was naffing around with my chorus pedal and I was like, aha, here we go. Power ballad C, let's do it. So yeah.
First of all, I'm very sorry to hear about your mum. I know what it's like to lose a parent as well. So once again, going back to that insignificance and life's too short, all that kind of stuff. I get it.
Sure.
So yeah, that's really, really interesting. And I love the thing you said, Zoomers are genreless. I mean, when I was growing up, I'm like 37 now, right? But when I was growing up, it was like you couldn't even be into metal and punk.
We were obsessed. Yeah,
it was ridiculous.
The lanes were so brutally like, yeah, you were a metal person, or you were this, or you were grunger, or you were like everything else, and it was like, yeah,
literally, yeah.
And you hated NSYNC, and you hated the Backstreet Boys, and you hated Britney Spears. Like that was the like,
oh my god, that was like
that era.
Yeah, that wasn't even like you couldn't even talk about that. But
unthinkable, exactly. And now we've all grown up and realised that was some of the most extraordinarily well-written music ever. Like Max Martin pop is like fundamentally genius music, because we all just got over ourselves and realised, and like there are many, many problems with the way that music is in the modern era. But the thing I think is by far the coolest and most exciting is that element of like genuine appreciation for almost all music and all genres as like valid art. It's so much better than what we in the late 90s, early 90s, we were such punishers about stuff, and it's like, ugh, get rid.
Yeah, you called it a power ballad, so I'll call it a power ballad. The power ballad that closes your album, even though it's not the same kind of feel or genre. But at Turnstile, when they release Go On, they've got like 3 or 4 tracks on there. They're essentially R&B songs. And I don't think they have any qualms with that whatsoever.
Absolutely. When that record came out, we were like nearly finished with the album, and I was like, right, the door's open now. It's all go now. Like whatever, all bets are off. Like we can do what we like. The door, like I really felt like those guys kicked down. In 10 years, we're gonna really look back at like how critical that album was for like letting us all be who we wanted to be. And then it was like Soul Glow's record came out and Zulu came out, and it was like suddenly, all genre bets were off. It was just about like, does your album slap or does it not slap? And it was like, it was formative. For me, I was like, this is critical for like the permission to do what I like,
100%. Did you by any chance? I'm trying to think. There might have been on a different day to you guys, but did you see Zulu, or have you seen Zulu?
I was lucky enough to see Zulu last year at New River Studios in Tottenham, so a tiny little sweatbox, and it was fucking brilliant, absolutely brilliant. They're so great, and the lineup was so weird that night in a good way, and like,
Yeah,
so good. And I saw Solgo last year, I think, at Boston Music Rooms, also amazing. It's just, yeah, it's incredible.
yeah.
It's just what a time, what a time.
Just seeing Zulu trees, it just reminded me. Just we were once again on the front row in this tiny tent, and oh my god, it was just like every time that kick pedal was used, everyone sort of took a step back. It was that like it just there might have been no point for my earplugs that day, but amazing. Yeah.
And again, the R&B interludes, like,
yeah,
all bets are off now. It's amazing.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah, exactly right. Love it. So you've touched a little bit on playing guitar, but I suppose you've got, from what I can hear from what you've recorded anyway, you've got a very particular style. For me, probably because I'm a massive fan, I hear a lot of Deftones. That chugginess, particular Diamond Eyes era Deftones. Maybe on this particular album anyway.
Sure.
What got you? I can see what got you into guitar, but what got you seriously? What made you want to band and writing songs and all that stuff?
Yeah, totally. So again, when I was a young teenager, I was like, I was into rock, I was a proper grunger, I was like in that world, doing that life. I was like, I asked my parents, like, can I have like guitar lessons? And I went to a teacher, and he was this really lovely guy, this ex-punk guy who was in like a kind of funk band. I'd brought my acoustic guitar, and I saw his bass, and I was like, oh, can I have a needle on that? And he was like, yeah. And I was like, this is cool. And now people will not know, but like Red Hot Chili Peppers were very much the style at the time. And so I was like, yeah, let's do like bass and like slap bass. And that felt like a kind of, so I played, I was much more like a bassist than I was a guitarist for many, many years. And then I would say, again, not like I owe it a lot, like it was actually playing in bands at church that got me back into playing guitar. And that taught me loads about like playing those kind of horrendous Christian rock songs. Taught me a lot about like basics of chord progressions, like basic songwriting, like how a decent song is structured. And I still think, I don't know if this sounds really arrogant, but I still think we structure our songs pretty well. Like they have quite good, like a section very rarely outstays its welcome because all of us in different ways. But I think, I have that ear for like, that I think those church songs help me just be like, no, bang, 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 like this bit, done, like you can't faff around, So this is very specific to this world, yeah. So it's like the church tradition that was in. So a lot of people are familiar with like Church of England, which is like C of E, old people playing an organ. It's not that. It's much more the kind of young, quote unquote, like I was in like a youth group in the evangelical church. And so the guys would, the band, there would be a band, first of all, which is very different, like with drums, bass, and guitar, playing a kind of COD U2 kind of Americanized, it's very American influence that came over to the UK in the 90s. And there's like a big mega church called Hillsong from Australia that really took it off, that people might be familiar with because they've been mired in scandal for the last few years. Lol. That's the kind of genre influence, is kind of, U2, Coldplay arena rock kind of stuff, but even worse and even more cheesy. Some of the songs were good songs, I have to admit, even in my kind of cringe retrospect. But that's the sort of vibe, like big delay pedal kind of situations,
okay.
And yeah,
sure, yeah, okay, that's really interesting to me. I know Christian rock is a thing. I'm a U2 fan. I know,
unfortunately, it is.
So I'm aware of their kind of Christianness, if you will. I just don't know much about it. So I think maybe a lot of our listeners might not know much about that either.
No, it's wild. It's wild. I mean, obviously, that's only one aspect of it. Like I would say, if people ask me who my favorite guitar players are, I always say like Tom Morello, because he was completely like Rage Against the Machine riffs taught me how to play bass, and that was like, I really became like a half decent bass player learning that whole album in full. Yeah, Tom Morello, Ben Weinman from Dillinger Escape Plan, because obviously like it's just breathtaking.
That explains a lot.
It does, right? Brett Hines from Mastodon, which also explains a lot, and then Prince. And I think hopefully I tried to on this album I tried to chuck in more Prince than I usually would, because I like Prince is oh, I'm even wearing a t-shirt today.
I noticed.
His formative influence on me in many ways and in many aspects of my life. But yeah, on my guitar playing as well, for sure.
Really interesting. Did you ever get to see Prince?
Twice, mate. Twice.
I saw him once.
I wish. I hate to brag, but like it's one of my things that I'm most delighted about. So I saw him once during the O2 run, and then the second time I saw him was actually a really random one. I saw him at this weird festival in Kent called Hot Farm, and like the day before, I saw they still had day tickets for like 40 quid, and I was like, obviously, I'm going to go to that. So I just pootled down in my little Ford Fiesta in like 2011, and it was comfortably one of the best gigs I've ever been to. You play for nearly 3 hours, hits, non-hits. He did this whole middle bit where because Larry Graham from Sly and the Family Stone had played earlier in the day, and he got Larry Graham to come out, and they did a load of covers and like Sly and the Family Stone songs. It was just bonkers, fucking bonkers. So yeah, I'm very glad to say I did. It was incredible. I
saw him at that tour. It was Third Eye Girl, I think, when he had a full girl band, and that was he was 40 minutes late, played no hits. He played like the opening intro to When Doves Cry, just went like that. And then just played something else. Perfect. Loved it. He did
that when he did that at the O2. He like played a sample of he just played that book just of When Doves Cry, and everyone was like, hey, and he was like, I got so many hits, I didn't even play that one. I just moved on. He must have a funny thing with that tune where he's like, I'm never gonna play it. You'll never really play it. Yeah.
Yeah, wicked. Okay, so with all that in mind, how did Ithaca come back? Was this your doing, or you and another member of your band?
Pretty much, yeah. To be honest, it kind of was in the very early stages. Yeah. I'd since I'd properly got into guitar, I'd always wanted to be in a band, particularly a metal band, because metal really kicked in and was a huge thing for me, particularly in my teenage years. We had been fanning about, a few of us from school, over summers and like in the music room during GCSE and all this sort of stuff. For years, we've been kind of noodling around and maybe we'll do something and blah, blah, blah. But after I graduated from uni, I was like, right, I want to do this band thing. Let's try and make it happen. Are you up for it? And Lewis, our drummer, who's my best mate, and Will are the guitarist, who I'm also very good friends with. He's both from school. I was like, yeah, should we make this happen? And we just put I just put a terrible ad on a like find my band member website, because I had no idea what I was doing. I was like, I'm not really connected in the scene. I don't know anyone. I'm not like cool. I don't know anyone. How am I going to find band members? So yeah, I just put an ad up, and thank God one of the people who replied was Jamila, our current vocalist, and our old bass player Drew, and yeah, that was it basically. We just sort of started building out from there. So yeah, we got incredibly lucky.
Did you have any intention of having a female fronted band, or was that just did you ever audition any male fronted singers? I was just curious, really.
No, thank God she was the best person who replied. I mean, because we had a couple of people who were like, there was a person who was like, oh yeah, I just like really love PJ Harvey. And I was like, okay, we're kind of more like a metal thing, is that all right? And they were like, yeah, definitely, yeah. And I just like really love PJ Harvey, and I was like, we're not quite talking the same language here. Anyway, Jamila replied. I mean, I'd put some quite weird and not weird, but some quite specific niche bands on there to kind of hopefully filter people down more. And Jamila responded, being like, oh yeah, I love those bands, blah, blah, blah. And I was like, wow, okay, this is really interesting. And when she was like, oh lol, I'm also a girl, I was like, well, firstly, I was like, this is actually brilliant, because I really would love to like be in a band to uplift someone. It really wasn't very common back then.
Still isn't, is it really?
It still isn't relatively at all. But 2012, you can imagine it was like, or whatever. Yeah, 2012, even. It was like very, very rare.
Particularly in this genre, I would say.
Exactly. Oh, totally. Screaming vocalists. I mean, yeah, there were so few. I mean, as I say, there was a band called Veils who I put as one of the kind of, if you like these three bands, that's what I want to do. And they had a female vocalist, and I don't know if that like gave her the sense that like we were really up for that, but they were one of very few bands, at all who did have a female vocalist. But yeah, no, I was actually, not in a weird way, but I was super psyched, to be honest. I was like, great, like this again, it's another thing that's gonna make us different, another thing that's gonna represent like our values as a band in terms of like representation and uplifting different voices. Like, brilliant, here we go, And I was like, all that mattered was like, could she scream? And turns out she screamed incredibly well. So yeah, it was a done deal.
Yeah, unbelievable vocalist, unbelievable.
Yeah, insane.
I think I may have mentioned this in my initial email to you, but you said quite a powerful speech. Talk to the crowd. Don't know what the right term to use there is. Is it a speech?
It's like a sermon, speech, boring, earnest, punishery ramblings. Anyway, yeah, one of those things.
You addressed the crowd.
Yeah, I chatted, I blabbed. Yeah,
about diversity in metal, alternative music, whatever you want to call it. Do you think it's becoming more inclusive?
Definitely.
Sure.
Sorry, I interrupted the question.
No, that's fine.
Too keen.
Okay, so it's kind of a double question, really. Do you think it's becoming increasingly inclusive? Which I think you do, but you can expand on that, of course. But also, where do you think the problems still are? Why are we still not there?
One of the things I started building into the little speech recently is that I think there's a fundamental misunderstanding. I think like contemporary language around diversity and inclusion and D&I and the kind of HR of it all, I think has really confused people about what we're really trying to even do here. I think in general, there's a bit of a ham-fistedness around those concepts, which we need to kind of revisit. And like, I think we need to kind of take a step back and understand what we're really trying to do in general with the kind of diversity and inclusion conversation. But I can definitely speak with some knowledge in the kind of rock and metal and hardcore space. I think a lot of people really have got confused about like the idea of diversity is just sort of a tick box exercise, or kind of something that's being forced upon them as like, oh, we have to be diverse, we have to do this. And I'm like, guys, I don't think people understand why people fight for this. It's not just some kind of census data thing. In rock and metal, like in particular, like this is a niche genre that is very, very fragile. And like, we know, if you look at the kind of future projections for this genre, they are very poor. Like, Iron Maiden are going to die one day. Metallica are going to die one day. Sorry to be bleak, but it's like, what the hell then happens to like the metal industry? Like, what is the future for these festivals? What is the future for the entire kind of cottage industry and the economy around this genre? Like, I heard someone really astutely say
that's a really good point. I've never thought about that, but that is a really, really good point. For
there's much wiser people than me who've said this before, honestly. But it's like I read a great metal journalist who I wish I could remember who it was who said this, but like, that metal is going to go the way of jazz, which is where it's going to wither on the outside and flourish on the inside, which is cool. But it's like, we know where jazz is actually now a bad example. When he was writing at the time, I think jazz felt way less. Jazz is now like actually one of the most exciting genres in the world. Thank God for our kind of Southeast London like icons, and the kind of Tomorrow's Warriors and all that sort of thing has massively revived the kind of engagement with jazz. But that was only because, people forget, that was only because there were active programs to redistribute resources to young people to get them into jazz and give them access to those spaces. Like Tomorrow's Warriors and that whole scene was like a diversity program, basically. Not in the kind of, obviously it was also about merit. They were incredibly talented musicians, but it's like, that's the difference, isn't it? That's where I think people get confused. They think that diversity programs are just these kind of, these boring things it's like, no, it's about redistribution of access and resources and power. Fundamentally, it's a question of power. And like, are you giving people opportunity to express their art? Like, it's not just about, like, it's not a passive thing, it's a proactive thing. That, I think, is the thing that deeply concerns me about this conversation, is that people think it's an obligation, rather than the only thing that we can do to keep rock and metal alive. Like, in my opinion, like, Otherwise, it's going to die. Like, it's going to die. We cannot rely passively on architects and Bring Me the Horizon to prop up the industry. We need more diverse voices. I'm sorry, but, like, it's not going to happen. Like, we need people of color. We need women. We need queer people. Like, we need to expand our audience beyond the same pool, like, because the kind of gene pool, the audience for metal and rock is shrinking, it seems to me, rather than expanding, until and they're not necessarily my favorite band, but like Sleep Token have massively, because they've completely come around the other way. You know what I mean? They're not diverse in terms of representation, but they are diverse in terms of genre, and they understand kind of contemporary use of social media and that kind of thing. Like, they have exploded the whole thing again, and to me, that is a really telling. Turnstile is a fabulous example. Soul Blow, Zulu, all these bands to me are extremely indicative examples of like how you expand beyond the typical barriers and do what nu metal did. Like, the reason why nu metal was so popular, even though a lot of the music was horrendous, was because it managed to have a level of kind of mainstream appeal. It had an understanding of kind of brand, of aesthetic, of star power, whatever else it is. And to me, nurturing different voices is how we crack that code. Like bringing people in who are like, oh, they've got a whole new perspective on this metal thing. Like, wow, that's actually interesting and cool. And like, the art is enriched by them being here. So that, sorry to go and get on my soapbox about it, but I'm just like, I feel like I hear so much like blasé kind of communication about diversity from exhausted people who just don't really know why, like, what's the long view of this work, So
see, it's interesting, isn't it? Because like the whole metal thing, right? Like, metal's got such a white man over 60 vibe to it, right? So
for sure,
Maiden go, Priest go, that's it, you've lost the whole market. When
exactly.
Metallica go, jeez, that's massive. That is
and then
massive.
when Slipknot get too old to do it, like, what the hell are we going to do? I mean, I'm seriously, like, 20 years, like, where the hell are we going to be? Like, yeah. So yeah, we've got to think long term.
Maybe what we were talking about earlier about sort of the breaking down of genres and putting a pop ballad at the end of your album is where it needs to go.
Well, I'm
maybe
biased.
these
I'd say yes, because obviously
maybe that's how download will look in 10 years. Who knows?
I kind of welcome that, to be honest. I mean, like, what excited me most, and where I really was like, this year, was looking at the Outbreak Fest lineup. Do you know Outbreak Fest?
Yeah.
I was like, this guys is how we crack the code. Like, and it's not reinventing the wheel. Like, Outbreak, for people listening who don't know, like, is a very well respected UK proper hardcore festival, like a hardcore fans festival. It's like full stage diving, like, a lot of really traditional hardcore straight down the line. And they booked a lot of those bands, and that's amazing. Like, for example, Jesus Piece, who also have diverse representation, and Zulu and all those other cool bands, Code Orange, etc. And they booked a load of like really heavy hip hop acts. So I think it was like JPEG Mafia, Death Grips, L Sweatshirt. And I looked at that and I was like, yes, exactly. Like, that is how we respond to the changing of the tide, is by following the, like, where things are clearly going, and breaking down our own genre barriers within our festivals, and being like, these are all, we know that, like, so if I for example, of course I listen to Death Grips, and of course I listen to L Sweatshirt just as much as I listen to Code Orange, because that's just what we do these days. That's just what it's like. So I saw that lineup and I was like, I annoyingly I couldn't go, but I was like desperate to get a ticket, because I was like, yes, this is the exact intersection of all my interests. And when I listen to, like, like Playboy Carti, even, I'm like, this is really heavy hip hop music. Like, there's no reason why this wouldn't fit on a metal festival bill. The only people who really get annoyed about it, unfortunately, are the bloody metal fans. They are the ones who really seem to be standing in the way of some of them. Really, some of them. I have to be clear, like, not all of them. Like, we're talking about, as you say, the very old school white male contingent who really just think metal is one thing, always has been, which obviously is fucking bollocks. If you have any even cursory knowledge of metal, it's never just been bullet belts and long hair. It's like, always been radically reinventing itself, but these people seem to ignore that. So yeah, it's for me, it's about like just risk taking is the fundamental answer to all of it. Take risks, book hip hop. I want to see Tyler the Creator on a download lineup. Honestly, I do. Like, I'm like, why not? Why the fuck not? Everyone who goes there likes him. Why wouldn't they go? You know, like, if you like Bring Me the Horizon, you absolutely like Tyler the Creator. I'm sorry, like, just do it. Just take a punt. I'm not saying for the whole weekend. Just try it for one of the days so that you can prop up your sales and subsidize the young metal bands. Like, to me, that makes, I don't know if, you know, to me, that's just like how this has got to go. I don't, again, I'm just ranting.
No,
I think,
no, I think you've hit the nail on the head. Outbreak killed it. I mean, Denzel Curry as well was there.
Denzel Curry, oh my God, incredible.
Incredible. But I mean, I'm a bit of a hip-hop enthusiast as well, so like I've been to my fair share of hip-hop gigs, and
just like loads of hardcore fans. This is what I'm saying. Yeah,
there's pits, there's people jumping around, you know, there's broken noses, there's people picking. It's the same shit.
Yeah, when I watch videos from like Rolling Loud and stuff, I'm like, this is way more excited. These guys are way more excited than like the download crowd. They are going absolutely fucking bananas. Like, they're moshing like we used to in the 90s for like Limp Bizkit and stuff. You know what I mean? It's like the crowds, the mosh pit, and they love the mosh pits. They're like, oh, mosh pit cam and all this sort of stuff. And I'm like, why aren't we? Not in a bad way, but I'm like, you know what I mean? I really feel like they're like the hip hop fans are the ones who are going nuts in the crowds these days, and they love that culture of like crowd participation that used to belong to us. So yeah, it's very telling for me. It's like, of course, these worlds can intersect.
Yeah, 100%. You're giving me so much to think about.
Sorry.
Oh, no, it's fine. Sam, thank you so much for this. It's been great. Really, really good talking to you.
Yeah, mate. Pleasure. Thanks, man. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for listening to We Are the Weirdos, Aunty-ji, a podcast by Weirdos Zine and Collective. Weirdo is a volunteer-run project that was created to document and celebrate the experiences, perspectives and contributions of South Asian people in alternative subcultures across the diaspora and Indian subcontinent. If you want to find out more about us, join our collective or support our work, visit our website weirdozine.com and follow us on Instagram at weirdo.z.